Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. Were aliens responsible for the Great 1965 Northeast Blackout? It's possible. I mean, why not? A lot of people, you probably heard about this. Over 30 million people went without power, basically all along the east coast of the United States into Canada in November of 1965 for about 14 hours. And there were a lot of UFO sightings that were reported in those areas before, during, and after. And some people wonder if that's what was responsible for the blackout. There wasn't a mundane explanation provided, but still, people wonder if that mundane explanation is the truth. Probably never know. But I think that they could do things like this based on other things that we know that they're responsible for, like the 1967 Malmstrom incident in Montana, where apparent extraterrestrial craft shows up over nuclear missile silo and shuts down all the missiles. They were able to do that, so why not be able to cut out all the power for as many people as possible, as many people as they want? That's possible. I mean, if you're an advanced civilization and you're able to travel great distances through space to come here, that means you have the ability to do stuff like that. You would imagine. And so it's very possible now that we should all know. I mean, basically everyone in the world should know at this point, unless you're extremely stupid. You got to be, at this point, right? You got to be extremely stupid at this point not to know that there's something here. I mean, really stupid. I mean, I was actually just earlier today, one of my subscribers on YouTube pointed me to the New York Post article that ran a couple days ago about the Vegas alien stuff, Scott Roeder's analysis and all that. And if you look into the comments section on there, there's a lot of dumbbells, a lot of dummies. I mean, these people, they look like they probably quit school when they were 16 years old after being stuck in second grade for 9 years straight. They figured they probably weren't going to ever get through it. So then they quit when they were 16, and now they're posting comments on the New York Post, right? Of things they don't know anything of. They have no critical thinking skills at all. These people are complete absolute dopes, nimrods, idiots, right? So unless you're one of those people, right, everyone else, smart people, should know that there's something here based on the evidence that has been presented recently. And that comes to my next point, is that who knows what these things are capable of, and perhaps they may have been responsible for things like that 1965 blackout. Now, if you go on Wikipedia and you read about this, it's funny. There's this big, long article about the blackout. Not once does anything mentioned about the UFO sightings. Not anywhere in there. You can't trust Wikipedia anymore. They want to suppress anything that has to do with UFOs and aliens. They want to make it look like it doesn't mean anything, that it's all silly. I don't know. I'm not sure if the guerrilla skepticism of Wikipedia is responsible for that article on there, but you know what? I've been doing some research here. There was a lot of UFO sightings that happened before, during, and after this great 1965 Northeast blackout, and so that's what I want to talk about today. Anyway, and actually, here's an article from the Smithsonian Magazine. It says here, it was Tuesday, November 9th, 1965, in the beginning of the biggest, most famous blackout this country has ever seen. It wasn't just New York City either. Much of the northeastern United States had gone dark. Parts of 9 states plus 3 Canadian provinces. In all, some 30 million people were left stumbling around, trying to remember where they'd last seen their candles and matches. In Manhattan alone, 800,000 people were stuck in subways, thousands more in elevators, stoplights being out of order. Ordinary citizens were now directing traffic. Doctors were delivering babies and performing surgery by flashlight. So it was a big deal back then. It was a big deal, and it happened sometime after 5 p.m. Eastern time, and the power didn't come on until the following morning, about 14 hours later. But anyway, it was when the explanation came around, it didn't seem like a lot of people weren't sure if is that all it was. According to this article, it says here, before the week was out, the official explanation for the blackout arrived. A faulty relay in Ontario, a device roughly the size of a light switch, had caused power stations throughout northeastern North America to shut down one after another. This was perhaps the first time most Americans had heard the term power grid. the complex, interconnected system that provides the power to keep our refrigerators humming and our lights on most of the time anyway. And then this article ends, and it was written by Greg Doherty. It's a pretty good article. He ends the article this way. He says, to this day, however, the blackout remains beloved of UFO buffs. They cite numerous well-documented reports of mysterious fireballs and other aerial oddities in the skies before, during, and after the event, including some in the vicinity of the Ontario power station. So, yeah, that's what was going on. There were a lot of UFO sightings. And here's another article from the Syracuse New Times from 2016 by Cheryl Costa, and she had a listing of some of the reported UFOs. November 9th, 1965, at 5 p.m., a Middletown, New York resident reported seeing a ball of bright green light in the sky. November 9th, 1965, at 5 p.m., a Jersey City, New Jersey resident reported seeing a bright object moving from north to south over Manhattan, then over lower Manhattan. The object shot straight up at extreme velocity. And at the same time, all of these are at the same time. At 5 p.m., a resident of Newton, Massachusetts, reported a bright fireball traveling east to west. Another one, at 5 p.m., an orchestra conductor on a flight between Syracuse and Rochester observed a bright light descend toward central New York. And I'm going to get into that one a little bit more. I have more information about that I want to share. And here's another one. At 5 p.m., a Camillus, New York housewife reported a huge dome-shaped object near a local substation about 5 minutes before the blackout. At 5 p.m., Cicero, New York, a local pilot in a small plane reported seeing a huge bright light hover near the high-tension wires crossing the Mohawk River. Another, at the same time, at 5 p.m., personnel from the Sir Adam Beck Hydroelectric Power Plant in Ontario, Canada, reported 4 strange lights over the power plant. At the same time, residents near the Niagara Falls Power Station reported seeing a huge glowing object hovering over the power station. Coincidence? You decide. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a coincidence. Anyway, let me just point this out. This is from a book called, famous book actually, called Flying Saucers Serious Business by Frank Edwards. And he talked about this. He had a chapter about UFOs and power outages, and that he talked extensively about this one in a chapter called In the Dark. It says here, the developing story of the Great Blackout of November 9th, 1965 received superb coverage from every angle in the nation's news media, and we need not recount it here. It was all over by the morning of November 10th, all over but explaining to the public why the impossible had happened. There was no general agreement among the great power supply concerns which were contributors to this multi-state grid, but the official explanation was that a small device in a Canadian hydroelectric generating plant had malfunctioned and that other instruments had subsequently misfunctioned, and that steps would be taken to try to prevent its recurrence. Strangely missing from the explanation was any further explanation of why the millions of dollars worth of electronic gear had failed to detect the disturbance and shift the load. Since I am certainly not an authority on such complex and intricate systems, I took the explanation to utilities engineers who are experts. They said that to them it seemed a little vague, like the blind man's description of the elephant. And then later on, he talks about this, the conductor of the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, who happened to be visiting family in Syracuse, who had seen something. It says here, Renato Pacini is the assistant conductor of the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. He and his wife had flown to Syracuse for a visit with Pacini's 2 brothers, Humbert, an electronics engineer, and Ramon, a construction engineer. The brothers and their wives had met the Indianapolis couple at the Syracuse airport, and the 6 of them got into the car to drive to their destination in Rochester. There was still considerable light in the western sky at 5:22 p.m. as they turned onto the expressway. Renato noticed a peculiarly brilliant light in the sky, clearly noticeable in spite of the skylight. He called it to the attention of the others in the party. All agreed that it was most unusual. As they drove along the highway, the light sank rapidly and moved towards Syracuse. They watched it for several minutes until it was so low that it was lost to sight in the clutter of hills and houses and darkness. Just then came the announcement over the car radio that the big blackout had struck. And then there was other people too. People saw stuff during it, after it. There was people that saw fireballs flying through the sky after it was over. During it. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff going on. So You have to wonder what was going on there. Was this some sort of a display, perhaps? A show of force to say, look what we can do kind of thing? Maybe sending a message to our government to say, hey, don't mess with us. This is what we can do. Look, let me show you what we can do. We'll shut you all down. We'll shut your electricity off. Could be. I mean, it's funny. I mean, over 30 million people that day, that evening, that whole night were without power over some little box the size of a light switch. That's it. That's how big it was. That caused 30 million people to lose all their power. And meanwhile, there's all these UFOs that people were seeing before, during, and after. So you have to ask yourself, you have to wonder, perhaps did these alien beings, were they responsible for it? They could have been. I mean, what were they doing? What were they hanging around these power stations for? So I think it's possible. Why not? And you look at other cases just 2 years later, the Malmstrom incident. I want to talk about that a little bit. We've talked about that a number of times on here. And here's an article from the Calgary Herald. It talks about Robert Salas. On the night of March 24th, 1967, Robert Salas was a 26-year-old United States Air Force lieutenant cocooned 20 meters below the Montana prairie, overseeing weaponry that could obliterate millions. Instead, without any warning, Salas said his menacing cluster of 10 Minutemen I intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, burrowed beneath the Malmstrom Air Force Base. A 5-hour drive southeast of Calgary seemed to be prey. I felt we were under attack, said Salas in a phone interview from his home near Ventura, California. But the assailants, he said, weren't any Cold War foes. Soviet technology couldn't have abruptly disabled the missile's guidance and control systems, which is what happened that night. You would have to have sent individual signals to each missile, and within seconds. We had no power, said Salas 82. This has never happened before, and we have nothing that could do that now. Salas said what transpired above his concrete and steel bunker holds the answer, or at least one of them. And goes on to say, just moments before the system's failure, a non-commissioned security officer on the surface made a series of increasingly frenzied phone calls to Salas, describing an oval-shaped form within pulsating, glowing orange red lights hovering over the installation. The NCO had also described the approach of the silent object, which was making unusual controlled maneuvers, such as flying very fast, coming to a dead stop, then reversing course and making 90-degree turns, said Salas, who was locked into the subterranean capsule for security reasons. He was screaming in the phone, terrified. I told him to secure the facility at all costs. Responding to his orders, other security guards scrambled to other launch sites in the complex, only to see glowing objects hovering over them, said Salas. It was reported that they lost radio contact with the flight security controller and were very shaken by the experience, he said. Less than a minute after the pulsating object had arrived over his launch control center, it had quickly departed. And then he also found, later on, Salas found himself in a meeting with his squadron commander and a special investigations officer, and he was told the incident didn't involve any kind of Air Force exercise. Salas said he was also told to never speak of the incident as it was now classified, and he signed a non-disclosure agreement, and he didn't start talking about this publicly until 1996. And that's the kind of thing that the government has been doing, the secret control group has been doing to people for decades now. Well, really, it doesn't make any sense at this point because the cat's out of the bag, despite the dummies out there that deny it, and it's over. Despite government comments that there's nothing to this, that they have no evidence of aliens, that doesn't count anymore. That's over with because we do have the evidence, and it's a done deal. And the thing is that this is one of the reasons you if you have some kind of a presence here, an alien presence here that's able to do things like this, perhaps maybe they were, I'm not saying guaranteed 100% that they were responsible for the 1965 Northeast Blackout, but they could have been. What was going on with all these flying saucer and UFO reports during that moment in time? What was that all about? And then the next thing you know, the power's out. Okay, and they're hovering around power stations. What's going on? Substations, stuff like that. All different parts of the East Coast, not just in New York, but all the way up into Canada. They're all over the place. What was going on there? And then a couple years later, you see they're able to shut down all those missiles individually like that, and that's impossible. Like Salah said, we don't even have the technology now to do something like that. We wouldn't have it. We wouldn't be able to do something like that. So, but these aliens, they have the power to do these kind of things. Obviously, they do. There's no question in my mind that this 1967 thing, definitely, there's no question that was extraterrestrial. That was not some Soviet technology, that some Soviet flying object that was able to do things like that and then shut those missiles down. It was extraterrestrials. They're sending out a message about our nuclear bombs. That's what it was. And maybe this 1965 blackout, maybe it was something similar. Maybe that was like some kind of a warning. Hey, look what we can do. I don't know. Could be. What were the UFOs doing there? Of course, again, with the explanation, we get some little light, some little object the size of a light switch in Ontario caused the power to go out for over 30 million people over the course of a 14-hour period. That's the explanation we get instead. And there's no discussion whatsoever in places like Wikipedia, which is about the UFO aspect of this, which is really sad, really sad. I mean, to me, right, with these people that are suppressing this kind of information, it's a disservice to all of us, really. I mean, it's a disservice. It's like keeping people in the dark deliberately. People are being kept in the dark deliberately, not just by the government, the secret control group, whatever they're called, right? Not only are they not being told the truth from them, but there's other people among us. There's the debunkers who don't want to accept this reality, who don't want to take the next big step for mankind, whatever their reasons are, right? Are holding us back, but they put us into a dangerous situation, right? I believe by pretending that this isn't real, right? It's setting us up. Well, at some point, we're going to be all caught with our pants down because of this, because there's too many people. All of our scientists, for the most part, don't take it seriously. So when something does finally happen, we're all going to be screwed. That's what it seems like to me by acting like this. And there's something else I want to talk about that was also in Frank Edwards' books about flying saucers, serious business. You know, the stuff that happened to Solace here, he was forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement. He wasn't allowed to talk about this. You know, why are we not allowed? Why is it going on like this for so long? 67, we're still hearing about threats today. In fact, Dr. Garry Nolan was just on a podcast, That UFO Podcast, just recently, and he was talking about, he was threatened too, and I'll talk about that in a second. But this was interesting. This is a story from 1965, another story from 1965, from December of 1965. And one of Frank Edwards' friends at the time, who was an official in a large industrial plant, he had a really good record, a work record. But on the morning one morning in early December 1965, he was on his way to work about 4:30 a.m. As he drove along a new superhighway that gave him a bypass around the large city where he lived, he was startled by a great orange-yellow ball which came from behind his car and passed overhead. It was in sight about 30 seconds. So what he did then, he stopped at the state police and he told them about it. And the state police in turn told the newspaper about it. And what he told the state trooper, he said that thing was as big as a house and was so bright that I could easily have driven with my lights off. It was frightening. But then later on, he's at work and he gets called into the plant superintendent's office, and there's two military officers in there wanting to talk to him. And it says here, these men grilled him for 2 hours, and then they closed their briefcases and turned off the recorder. One of the officers said, "We can't tell you what to do, but we can offer a suggestion. Don't talk about this matter to anyone. May we rely on you?" When my friend said that he would like to think about it, the other officer took over. And this is what the other officer said. It says, "This plant handles government contracts, and we would hate to feel that you had caused them any difficulties, of course. But if necessary, we would take the appropriate action if you decline to cooperate." And of course, unfortunately, the guy ended up cooperating, so he didn't talk about it anymore publicly. So this is the kind of stuff that people are doing. This is the kind of stuff the government has been doing to people, scaring them, and they're still doing it. They're still doing it. Now, Garry Nolan was on that UFO podcast, and there's a little article here about it, actually, from the Irish Star. It says here, I'm just going to read a little bit of this article, and then I'll read the full quote. I actually I'll leave the links for this article and for the podcast. Says here, a top professor from a leading United States university has reportedly received an ominous official warning to be careful what you say. Stanford's Professor Garry Nolan shared this revelation, which you can see in this video, following the news of a suicide by someone associated with the UFO back engineering program. Daniel Sheehan, a lawyer linked with the UFO disclosure community, announced the unnamed engineer's death, stating, "It wasn't until law enforcement concluded its investigation that we learned that no foul play was involved." His client, ex-Pentagon agent Lou Elizondo, also issued a statement emphasizing he has no thoughts of self-harm. So what they're talking about here, there was somebody died recently. It was an apparent suicide. Some people were thinking that it might have been nefarious. Danny Sheehan later says that no, it looks like there was no foul play, that this guy really did commit suicide. Apparently this was some whistleblower, an engineer. And Lou Elizondo, of course, provided a statement saying he wants everyone to know that he's not suicidal. He wants to make that clear to everyone. It says here, Elizondo claimed he had been informed of a threat to his life due to his UFO activism and wrote, "I would like to make this perfectly clear to the American people. I am not prone to accidents. I'm not suicidal. I'm not abusing drugs. I am not engaged in any illicit activities. If something happens to me or my family members in the future, you will know what happened." And now it says Nolan, while speaking of Stanford, he's speaking to That UFO Podcast. He described a chilling phone call he received discouraging him from revealing too much about the United States government's UFO program. And here's what he said. I actually wrote it down. He says, "I got a phone call myself at one point, basically telling me to be careful how I was talking about things. It shook me. It was a call from somebody within the government. It was a threat. That's the first time I ever felt this is getting personal. It wasn't a threat by them. It was telling me that the way I was talking about things, I needed to be careful because there are others who will apparently hurt him." Of course, as Garry Nolan has been pretty much outspoken about UFOs over the past few years, and it says here he has become more involved in UFO community since 2012, following his work debunking the so-called alien mummy discovered in Chile's Atacama Desert. He then recounted being approached by some people representing the government and an aerospace corporation to help them understand the medical harm that had come to some individuals related to supposed interactions with an anomalous craft, because they required the kinds of blood analysis that my lab can do. And in May 2023, he made a bold claim that various global governments have obtained materials from extraterrestrial vehicles, asserting that it's 100% certain that aliens have just visited Earth, but have been doing so for quite some time. But see, he gets threatened because he's outspoken about this stuff. He's telling, you have a scientist here from Stanford who's telling the world, yeah, it's 100% there's some sort of a program going on, to reverse engineer these things and retrieve the crashes. There's aliens here. I mean, he had his own experiences himself, but then he gets a phone call saying, you better keep that down. You don't know what might happen. Hey, you know what I mean? That's a bunch of nonsense. That's a bunch, we need to stop this already. I mean, I don't understand it. There's something here. There's most certainly something here. And everyone knows it now, so I don't know what the game is at this point. I mean, if their secret control group has the power to send out agents to kill people or threaten people or whatever they're going to do, well, I mean, why even bother? Well, you might as well just end this now. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, because the evidence is out there. It's floating around right now. More and more people are going to learn about it. Except for the dummies I was talking about. Yeah, you could convince them of that it's nothing, but everyone else, people with brains in their skulls, are going to know. So why even bother? I imagine that there's probably I think of the one scene in the movie Scarface, the remake, the 1983 version with Al Pacino in it, when at one point that Colombian drug lord calls Scarface up, Tony Montana, played by Al Pacino, to come down to Colombia because they have a big problem. And he goes there, and there's all these officials there. There's some people, some agents from the United States. There's generals from Colombia. There's all these people involved in this drug trade, this illegal cocaine trade, and they're all worried because there's some guy showing up on TV on different talk shows and stuff talking about this Colombian drug lord and how he needs to be stopped. And that's the problem. They want Tony to take care of it. That's why I imagine that there's probably a group of these secret control group sitting around looking at a TV with these pissed off faces, looking at people like Scott Roeder and myself, and among other people, talking about this stuff all the time, because to them, right, we're problems because we want to get the truth out. Well, you know what? I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Whatever happens, right? It doesn't matter, right? But it's coming out, so you might as well just come clean at this point. I don't care. It doesn't matter what happens, right? I don't care. I just don't care, right? So you might as well just come clean with it, and because this drum's gonna keep getting pounded. It's not gonna stop. I'm not gonna stop pounding the drum. Neither there's a lot of other people who ain't gonna stop pounding the drum either, and it's all over. The jig is up. It's over. So you might as well just forget about it and hang up the gloves. It's over. This run you had was good. 80 years almost. It's time. It's over now. Everyone's going to find out about it. They're finding out about it now, except for the dummies on the New York who follow the New York Post and put comments there. Except for idiots like that. Outside of that, everyone else is going to know. So I don't understand it. It's time to end these threats. It's time to end this nonsense. It's time to come clean. We shouldn't have to wait for Congress to do anything at this point, right? We shouldn't have to wait for any more bills to get passed. The information's already out there. It's already there. It's time to end this. It's time to just come clean already. We all know that there's an alien presence here, and there's not anything you could do to change that fact. I mean, you could come out and you could tell stupid lies, but most people are going to look at this, and it's going to snowball, and it's going to be undeniable. Maybe even some of the dopes from the New York that comment on the New York Post, right? The people who follow Stephen Greenstreet, those idiots, they might even come around once they see it all presented to them, right? It's over. It's over, man. So what are you doing? Take your threats. Take your nonsense. Take your tough guy talk and your agents who threaten people, and end it. It's over. You're done. It's over. Anyway, I want to say thank you all for joining me. Until next time.